it would have hurt my mental health to shut myself away and just deal with cancer. I got ushered into the comfortable room, and as soon as you get ushered into the comfortable room, you know you're going to get bad news. You know,
We're diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer.
correct.
Having seen the work that you've done in the world of emotional intelligence, and way back when,
In my opinion, leadership is 95% management. It's only 5% inspiration, if that. I've probably spent the whole of my life wanting people to be proud of me. They're proud of me and they'd like me to be around longer. And I'm proud of them and I'd like to be around longer. But actually, fate is going to have its hand in that.
This episode of Leaders in Disguise is a conversation I've been quietly preparing for some time. Julian Hall is the founder of Calm People, co-founder of Inner Calm, and a respected voice in emotional resilience. For years, he's helped leaders manage stress, anger, and conflict. But what happens when the person who teaches resilience is forced to live it every day? In 2023, Julian was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Since then, he's chosen to lead not from fear, but from peace. This episode isn't about business advice, it's about the human being behind the business. It's about what it means to keep showing up when life gives you news that you never expected, and how you can still lead, live, and even find joy through it all. This is a deeply honest conversation about illness, identity, and impact. But above all, it's a story of strength. So let's get into it. Julian, welcome to Leaders in Disguise. How are you feeling, first of all? How does it feel to be here? And I should say thank you, because I approached you and said, please, will you give me the honour to have this conversation with you?
So, first of all, you're welcome, and you approached me in the perfect way, because you literally said, I think, I'm not even sure whether I dare have this conversation with you, Julian, and you're really, really sensitive about it. So thank you for that. I'm really delighted to be here, and I'm full of a mixture of feelings and emotions. And it was when you, in your introduction, said this is about the person sort of really behind all this, that there was a little sort of gulp moment for me. And I thought, wow, I've possibly been so used in the last 2.5 years to be putting on a certain kind of front, an image which I've adopted and I've assimilated into myself, and also works and is mainly me. But when someone wants to look a little bit behind that, that feels really quite scary. So I'm a mixture of really happy, really comfortable, and really scared. So,
you're in safe hands. I will look after you. And I promised you that. I genuinely do see it as a privilege to be able to tell your story, because I've seen what you've done over how long have we known each other, by the way? I should have done this before.
I think it's in my mind, I think it's about 14 years.
That's the number that was in my head. So yeah. I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, 14 years. And having seen the work that you've done in the world of emotional intelligence, and way back when was it Beat the Anger or something like that?
Yes.
Was the business that you went out to?
It was. The brand name was Beating Anger, Anger Management. Incredibly aggressive brand name, isn't it? Which I wasn't responsible for. I was working with other people who are responsible for that brand. But I much prefer the brand Calm People.
Yeah. So you've gone less angry, more calm?
Yeah.
Or were you always a calm person?
That's really interesting. If you see me on the golf course, I still am a really angry person. Okay. So I say to my colleague golfers, like, it doesn't work on a golf course. That's just the way it is. But I think I would not categorize myself as an angry person. I was quite highly stressed, and sometimes that would come out in anger. And I have generally become calmer. But there's a yin and a yang to all this stuff, because, the good side of stress is excitement and positivity. The downside is stress and overwhelm, and anger and things like that. So it all goes and flows and ebbs and flows. Yes, I'm generally calmer. And I think I think I like myself a little bit more than I probably did 14 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And that's what calms me down.
It's an interesting word, anger, though, isn't it? And you've just beautifully articulated that. Of course, it's the area that you work in, is that of where it comes from and the high levels of stress. Do I remember correctly that you went out and did a qualification and was one of the pioneering people in that world at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. I trained with the British Association of Anger Management, who an amazing group of people, and I had some amazing experiences. Some were really, really funny and amusing. We can share those another time, and a lot of them quite poignant and quite sad as well. But yeah, I trained in anger management to facilitate anger management workshops, and I've pretty much been doing that ever since, because when you roll things back in terms of mental health to 14 years ago, 15 years ago, the difference then was we didn't really talk about our mental health in the way that we supposedly talk about it now. I still don't think we really talk about it in a proper engaged way, but at least it's on the agenda now. But so 15 years ago, in order to get somebody to engage with the idea of talking about the mental health, you had to have a hook. And for us, that hook was anger management. So we were going in at quite an extreme level, then creating a safe place. And then that safe place became a place to actually just work on your own mental health. That's really what we were doing. And we're still doing that now. We just do it from a slightly different perspective.
If I may, moving on, that you've spent more than a decade helping others stay grounded through change and crisis, but today you're living every day by day, I guess is perhaps in so many ways. How different does it feel when it's your own life on the line?
That is genuinely a really, really interesting question. And I'll probably have to wend my way around it in different ways. The part of it is that it's entirely natural. Another part of it is that it almost feels like, really weirdly, like my life has been building up to this moment. So that I've trained in this stuff and I have an opportunity to show people that actually this is really important and this is really, really about life. And then sometimes there's just moments where I'm genuinely fearfully scared as to what the future is going to hold, what the future is going to be like for my wife and my children, and what the end is going to look like, quite frankly, or feel like more. So there's all those other fears as well that are coming out. So it's a whole mixture, it's a whole mosaic of things going on. But mostly it's weirdly a really nice, can you term it as nice? Can I term it as nice? It's a genuine opportunity to be able to say to people, this stuff's important. The mental health side of things is really, really important. And we can improve the quality of our lives no matter what situation we are in with these tools and techniques. And I guess I'm now becoming a living example of that.
Brilliant. And you can use the word nice. Yeah, and I do. I see it. It's gone 360. Is that there? I can't think of the right phrase, so I'll move on. But yeah,
it feels okay.
Yeah, it's great from that point of view that you've been able to use that and see it from a different angle. But sad and unfortunate. But
yeah, well, I think one of my daughters, when I was first in hospital, came to see me, and I'm sure we'll talk about tools and techniques later. So she handed me something that was part of the toolkit that I would give to someone else. And she didn't say it, but she effectively said, "Healer, heal thyself." That's pretty, and I guess that's the opportunity I've got, is to be able to go, I'm authentic. I need to emphasize, for the purpose of this and anybody listening, I've always been authentic. I got into this side of personal development and mental health with such a joy that I knew that it all applied to me as much as it applied to everybody else. And therefore I've always used everything that I've taught to people. I've used it on myself as well. It's just now it's even more important.
Oh. Yeah. Should we talk about the diagnosis and diving into that for people to fully understand? So you were diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer.
Correct.
Would you just give us a little bit of a more in depth of what that means?
Yeah. So stage 4, first of all, technically means that it has metastasized, which means it's moved to other major organs in your body. So the diagnosis for me was that you've got bowel cancer that's moved through your lymph nodes and it's moved into your liver. And that was the initial diagnosis. And then as treatment went on and we got to September last year, a little bit earlier than September last year, it was revealed that it had also made its way into my lungs as well, which genuinely for me was the most scary part, because I think, again, as a child brought up in the 70s, lung cancer was talked about a great deal, and that was quite scary. So the thought that I had cancer in my lungs was a really, really scary prospect. But the professionals will then want to emphasise, I don't have lung cancer, I have bowel cancer that has moved through my body.
I say that makes sense.
Yeah. So and that's where we are now. I now have bowel cancer, it's in my liver, it's in my lungs, and we are still treating it, even though the diagnosis is different to what it was initially.
When was it you found out then? 2023, was it that you were diagnosed?
January 2023. I go for endoscopy, I think that's the correct term, and it's in that straight after that. I got ushered into the comfortable room. And as soon as you get ushered into the comfortable room, you know you're going to get bad news, because the consultant could have said, Julian, everything's okay, no problem. But they took me to this nice room with comfortable chairs. So I knew something was going on. And this amazing lady dealt with me in exactly the way I would want to be dealt with, where she was compassionate and she was direct. And she said, look, I've seen some stuff in there. I could be proved wrong, but I'm 100% sure it's cancerous. And so I feel obliged to tell you that at this moment in time. Taken biopsies, we'll send them off for analysis, and we will be back in touch as soon as we can. But you need to know this is the start of a journey.
Could you, and I appreciate everybody's journey, diagnosis is very different. What signs were there for you? What made you go to that appointment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, over 6 months before, I'd seen blood in my stools when I'd been going to the toilet. I'd been to my GP. At that moment, he examines me physically, and his diagnosis was that I had an internal pile that was just bleeding occasionally, and really it's not a problem. But at that point, he said, but to calm your anxious mind, Julian, I'll do a full range of blood tests for you. And interestingly, in my mind, I didn't ask him, but in my mind, I made up that part of this full range of blood tests would mean you'd be covering things like cancer. Okay. Anyway, roll on 6 months later, so we're talking December 2022, I go back again and I say, look, symptoms have got worse, I'm more irregular in my bowel movements, and there's still blood there. What else can we do? And that was the point that a different doctor said, I still think it's an internal pile, but I tell you what, why don't we do this thing called a FIT test? Which is a fecal immunology test. That's where you send off a bit of your poo, they analyse it, and that's what I did. And then very early in January, I'm getting phone calls saying, right, the FIT test says there's blood in your stools, we need to send you for this endoscopy, if I've used the right term. But basically, I've had a camera stuck up my rectum and they've gone as far as they can. As it turned out, it was a very quick appointment. They only went a short way up my bowel because they found a rather large lump that was blocking the way, and they literally couldn't go any further. And
so that was the sign, I guess, for them.
Yeah.
But so I'm just doing the maths on that. So a year really of the back and forth to bits of appointments.
It was 6, 7, 8 months maybe. Yeah. And I think that there's nothing, I think that's fairly typical of a lot of people's journey. You go with some symptoms, maybe the doctor goes, I'm not sure it's that, let's try a few things. Things get a bit worse, you go back again, and
just say, yeah, and that's it. And great that you identified something that wasn't right and you went and sought that help, because, and I'm going to stereotype us men a little bit, so forgive me.
No.
And forgive everyone that's watching and listening, because we aren't great. And I do lots of work with Facial Palsy UK. As people know, I had facial palsy when I was 18 and still do now. And involved in a men's group that don't really open up and don't really talk about these things. Right. Do you see that? I know you've probably done a lot of work with men over the years in your workshops back in the day as well. was that, do you see that as a problem stereotypically, that we do struggle to get access to and go and speak to our doctor? And what, in your opinion, are the reasons why we don't reach out for help?
Yeah, it is still a problem. And I think there's lots of different levels to it, but the two, in my opinion, the two key ones are, one is that in some way my manhood is challenged. So therefore, and that sounds very, very old fashioned, but that still exists within a lot of us, that my status as the male in the family might be challenged if I'm weak or weakened or in some way. And then the other thing is just very simple avoidance, which is that I don't really want to go to the doctors to ask him what's wrong, because he might tell me what's really wrong. And then it might be really scary, and I might have to deal with something like I'm dealing with.
Avoidance.
Yeah, absolutely. The irony being, the more you avoid it, the worse it's going to get, if that's what it is. And if you go in there early and find out that's not what it is, well, you've saved yourself a whole load of background fear, because just because I choose to ignore something, the fear doesn't go away. It just stays there festering a little bit more until eventually I do something about it.
Yeah. And certainly that's what we need to be going and getting that early diagnosis if we can, because that does help and improve from what we understand. So if I may, just jumping back to that diagnosis point then. So you get the news, you're in the comfortable chairs, you've been told this is what's happening. Could you just give me an insight, and for people listening, of what it was like for those first couple of weeks? What happens when we get that news, and who did you speak to, or who didn't you speak to?
Well, that's good question. So I literally drove home with tears in my eyes, which I then managed to sort of suppress by the time I walked in the door. And I walked straight in the door. My wife's sitting on the sofa, and she said, "Oh, hi, how'd you get on?" And I went, "Not great." And immediately then saw her face just crumble. And I sat down and told her what was going on. And she was amazing. After the upset, she goes into, well, we can deal with this mode. And then we sat there quietly and said, well, who are we going to tell? And who can we not tell? As in, not tell. Double negative. Who must we tell? Yeah. And the instant one, of course, is closest family, children, my sister, my parents, whichever ones were alive at that point. My dad was. And so, and then we had the added complication that one daughter was living at home, the other one was working abroad on luxury yachts. So we had it's who do we tell first? So it was really tough, but it was like, Frankie needs to talk to you. She was abroad. Tony, this is what's going on. And of course, for Frankie, the natural need to be supportive and feel in control is, right, well, do I need to come home? And my answer was literally at that point was, no, you need to understand, I'm not going anywhere soon. You carry on doing exactly what you're doing. And if you like, that's a message that's carried on being reinforced all the way through. To the point in September when I get a terminal diagnosis, the same message for both of them was, none of your life plans change. I don't want you changing anything in your life because something serious is happening to me. That's absolutely, don't want anything of that. I'm predicting in my mind where some of our conversations are going, which is why I'm sort of stopping there, because we will touch on that again later, I'm sure. But I'm very, very clear to them is that they have their lives to lead. So mine being shortened in some way, I don't want to make... I'm thinking of a 1970s advert. I don't want to make a drama out of a crisis. There was an insurance company had a tagline that said that. Yeah, it is at that moment it's a crisis. It doesn't need to be a drama where everybody comes round and makes it more of a drama.
I suppose you're still processing it at that point yourself, and I wondered, are we talking hours or days, or did you wait a week?
No, I think I was hours into it when I told my 4 children, and then a WhatsApp message went out to my male WhatsApp group. They immediately shared it with their wives, who are part of my wife's female support network, and then suddenly they immediately knew, And then I think at that point, pretty much all the people I wanted to know knew. And then over time, obviously, news seeps out and gets around to people quite naturally. And that's perfectly normal.
Is it true that it wasn't until you started treatment that you didn't tell anybody else? And I'm just looking at my notes. The day after your first chemotherapy session, you went to a room full of strangers at a CIPD event, a local event. Was it Bristol, I think you mentioned? Yeah. And you told the whole room, but you still hadn't told the world, if you like.
Yeah. And there's I'm conscious every time I answer it, I go, there's several different aspects to this. It's like,
it's complex. Yeah.
So there's part of it. One is that I was never going to be someone who shouted about it on social media. I didn't want to go out on social media and cause a big, as I would name it, as a drama about it. So I kept it to a fairly close-knit group of people. Some people in my business network knew, some people didn't. I've now come out onto social media and made a big drama about it because I want to raise the profile, and there's two areas I want to hit. One is I'm raising money for 3 really great causes, so I want lots of profile around that, so that people give money. And the other is I want to, and I think I can help people change their own personal narrative around a cancer diagnosis. So I want to start doing that as well. Meanwhile, I have surgery to give me a stoma. Yeah. That was really important because if the lump carried on growing, it could have perforated my bowel, and a perforated bowel is actually more serious than the cancer condition I was suffering at that time. So therefore, to make sure that wasn't going to be a problem, they diverted my bowel outside my body, and I now have a stoma. And then I had started chemotherapy about 4 weeks later, and I've got various different appointments, meetings, work, commitments booked into my diary, and I'm not unbooking them because I want to see how things go. And there's this meeting coming up with the CIPD where I was going to talk about stress, and my wife said, "You're not going to do that, are you?" It was the day after I started chemotherapy, and she says, "You're not going to do that, are you?" I said, "Well, yes, I am." And so there's a nothing's going to stop me. There's a partly because my wife said you're not going to, and I go, well, therefore, yes, I am. And there's a partly me just wanting to show that you can do this stuff if you want to. And the particular chemotherapy I was on was one where I had what's called a PICC line. So that's a permanently inserted line, or semi-permanently inserted line, into my vein that they just plug me into to deliver the drugs. And the reason I had to have that is that the drugs, you don't just get them in a few hours in hospital. They connect a bottle pump to you. And that's for 48 hours. I've carrying that around with me. I'm sleeping with it, and it's continuing to pump chemotherapy into my body for 48 hours. So I was going to drive down to Bristol, stand in front of a group of people, talk about stress with my new stoma, with a pump on my side, pumping chemotherapy into my body. And my wife's compromise on this was, well, you can't drive yourself because you're not meant to drive on chemotherapy. And I go, okay. And one of my best friends said, one of my best friends said, I'll drive you down. I bet she thought he was really helpful. And she said, fine, okay, do it. And that's what happened. I was driven down to Bristol. I stood in front of a group of people, and it gave me an opportunity to practice what then became my script to hundreds of people over the last few years, where I've stood in front of groups or I've stood in front of meetings, and I've introduced myself. And the first thing I do is I introduce my stoma.
Who has a name?
It has a name, yeah. And I do it because if you know anyone who's got a stoma, they have little or no control over it. So I didn't mention this to you earlier, Gary, but at any moment during our recording, this stoma could join in the conversation, okay? And it will do that through a fairly loud, rippling, farty noise. So what I say to people is that if that happens, feel free to laugh out loud, giggle along, because I will be doing the same, because I may be 57 years old, but deep inside there's a 7-year-old inner child that just loves a really good fart joke. So that's that bit out the way. And then I go, and by the way, most people have a stoma give it a name. I've given mine a name. It's Kia stoma. And I love that. I just think it's hilarious. I can't take credit for the name. Claire Bicknell was the one who suggested that. And it's not a comment on our Prime Minister. He was only the leader of the opposition when I gave my stoma my name. It's more a comment on politicians in general, really, because they are prone to interrupt conversations with gas, really. So there we go. I just think it's a really great name.
A lot of hot air in politics.
Exactly. Yeah, you put it much better than me.
I love the name. I do, and I think giving that level of, again, that vulnerability to the room, and practicing and talking about something that is so new to you to a room full of perfect strangers is the best place to practice and have that conversation.
Yeah.
And I just, based on what you've just said, I'm sure it wasn't a room of silence and tears. It was perhaps tears of laughter and tears. Well received.
Yes, shock, I think. And then,
why is this guy stood here?
Yeah. And what, really? You did chemotherapy yesterday and you're standing here? Are you an idiot? Sort of thing. I imagine that reaction was going through the room as well. But it was a really, really well received. And I've always made a practice of sharing my own levels of vulnerability with people at the beginning so that hopefully gives them permission to share theirs. This just took it to a slightly different level. And genuinely, it was a pleasure to do it. And you're absolutely right. Easier to do it in front of a group of strangers. And feels almost safer to do it in front of a group of strangers, and it gave me huge benefits in terms of my mental health and self-acceptance and things like that were going on. So there's always a two-way process in all this stuff. I get as much out of it as people get from me.
Talk me through that word normal. You wanted to keep the normality going on the back of chemo, which can be very debilitating in itself, depending on people going through it. But you use that word quite consciously of just want to just keep that normality, that just a normal day, no matter what other people were saying, stop and don't carry on. How important has it been for you to maintain normal?
It has been really, really important. And to be really clear, my previous career was in financial services. So I was quite well provided for in terms of insurance policies. So I could have just not worked at all, but I chose to carry on working part-time because my work means a lot to me and I wanted to keep a sense of meaning and purpose going through my world and something to keep aiming for and keep working towards on the way out of my cancer journey. That was really, really important. And then, again, it's back down to I didn't want to just shrink away, hide away, and completely change my life because of this potentially life-changing diagnosis. I wanted to be able to say, no, that's okay. This is part of life. Life still goes on, it would have hurt my mental health to shut myself away and just deal with cancer. There were days when I had to, and the first treatment I went on to had a distinct cycle, which was about 3 days into it, your energy levels just went right down. And all I could do was spend 2 days lying on the sofa watching Netflix. That was all I could do. So, but we learned what that cycle was, and the oncology nurses are really good at helping you predict that. They've seen it in other people, so they say that's pretty much what the cycle is. So I had green days in my calendar, I had red days in my calendar. So when people wanted to book work in, I was pretty sure that would be a green day. I'd commit to it.
That's good.
Yeah,
you can predict. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you know in advance that what appointments you've got scheduled and what day.
Yeah.
And I guess in 4 weeks' time, if you knew that wasn't looking likely, then that's when you can move things around if needed.
Yeah. And I'm really proud that in 2.5 years, I think I've cancelled 2 workshops. Oh. So that's all I've done.
You talk about, and I went through your blogs, your coming out, I've got cancer blogs and the fundraising. We absolutely need to talk about that at some point. So please remind me at the end if we forget to mention it. We need to give a shout out to those fundraising and point people in that direction. I'm sure we'll do that on social media anyway. But you wrote so openly about not wanting to have that fear-based relationship with cancer. It's not something that we hear very often. What did it take to reach that place, and how have you been able to stay there?
So what it took was a lot of dog walks. Okay, my dog is responsible for a lot of my thought processes.
We hear that a lot on this podcast. People's dogs are huge for their
They
well-being.
are the greatest gift. Yeah, and so it took a lot of dog walks, and eventually it all culminated. I've got a series of sort of 3 things that happened to me that I merge all into one, almost 24 hours, but they probably happened over a week. Yeah. But the first one was I went on a dog walk, and as I walked on this dog walk, I realized what was going on for me was that I was gradually talking myself into what I call a victim mindset. And it goes something like this, where I'd walk through the village I live in and people bump into me and say, "Hi, how's it going?" They'd heard about my condition. And this is quite early on. I'm really positive about it. And I go, "Oh, it's all going great. Had the stoma, all good. Go and start chemotherapy. All brilliant. Really looking forward to getting it done and dusted," sort of thing. And they go, "Oh, that's great." And then they'd look at me with that look. And that look I can only describe as slightly sad eyes. And I'm a bit of a people pleaser. And so in order to please them, their need to know that I wasn't just dealing with it really, really well, I'd say something like, well, of course, if I met someone who'd been diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer, I'd put in my mind, I'd know they're in for a bit of a tough fight. But don't worry, I'm up for it, and this ain't going to be a problem, sort of thing. So I was sort of acknowledging that this is, but what I was really doing was I was talking myself into getting up every day and having a fight. And if you get up every day expecting to have a fight, the first thing is you probably will have a fight with somebody. And second of all, it's completely and utterly exhausting. So I decided I didn't want to have that mindset. And on that walk, I decided that what I really needed to do is to have a really good positive vision of what my cancer journey was going to be, what the outcome was going to be. And then I needed to direct myself gently and solidly towards that every day as part of my mental health routine. So I came back from that dog walk with that idea that I was not going to have a fear-based relationship with cancer, and I was going to have an inspirational, self-inspired relationship. Maybe that day, or maybe a couple of days later, I'm reading Deepak Chopra, Quantum Healing. And in there's this sentence where he says, fear is a really good short-term motivator. It's not a very good long-term motivator. A really good long-term motivator is having a really good inspired vision. All right. And I'm going like, there's a man who's talking the same language as me. And, I know what I'm doing. I've got a mindset and I'm searching around for the evidence to support it, and I'm finding it. Yeah. And then what also happens then is that I get a get well card through the post from a lady I've already mentioned in this podcast, Claire Bicknell, who runs a network called Katina Network. And Claire's an amazing lady. But this card I received, it was the second card I'd received from her in about 7 days. All right. And so I looked at it, I thought, well, that's really nice of her. I sent her a jokey little text saying something around senile dementia or something like that. You've already sent me one of these cards. and I get this response back from her that goes, no, I first of all love buying cards. Second of all, I'm going to send you a get well card every week until you ring that bell. All right. And I'm quite emotional saying this now. So I knew at that moment that I got somebody in my corner who had the same inspirational led thought process that I had, and that they were in my corner. And that meant so much to me. And so, well, what can I say? That was the catalyst and the start of the journey. I have since received a get well card every single week from Claire. I've got them collected, and it's only after September, when the diagnosis changed, that I sat down with her and said, look, you can't really keep saying get well soon, can you, when we know there's a different track to this. So we've agreed that she's going to send me one every month, and I still get one every month.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, she's an amazing person.
Cost her a fortune in stamps.
It's cost her an absolute fortune, yeah, and her husband, and time as well, choosing. And she's moved on. We share a sense of humour, which I would say is carry-on film-based sense of humour. And so she will search for cards that have that sense of humour in it, which means that she's ended up grabbing birthday cards and changing the message. So it's the energy she's put into it.
Going as well. So by the sounds of it, it's kept you entertained.
Oh, massively. Yeah. So brilliant.
And it's really lovely hearing how that's transformed from a deeply personal, supportive message, and I can see how much it's impacted you, to something that actually has kept your spirits going. When you've had that bad news, it's kept you going and going, oh, actually, can we not do this? And she was like, well, we'll just do it for a different reason. We'll do it at a different frequency.
Yeah.
But there's only so many cards in the world. I'm sure she's worked her way through Moonpig or
honestly,
the cards available.
Yeah. And it also taught me the power of community. And I sort of already knew that. I've got that in my background. And it taught me the power of your community. And I think a lot of people go through these sorts of journeys I go through, and they will use phrases like, well, you find yourself in a situation like that, you really find out who your friends are. And they mean it in a very passive-aggressive, victim-like sense of feeling left and alone and not supported in the way they wanted to. My experience is completely different. I really found out who my friends are in the nicest possible way. I've got an amazing, wide group of incredibly supportive people who, at the drop of the hat, will do anything I need. And I had a particular conversation with one of them. It was the guy who was driving me down to Bristol. I said, you don't need to do that. And he said, well, I do. He said, and you'd do it for me. And I paused and reflected and went, yeah, I would, wouldn't I? And I accepted his support because I absolutely knew we're part of that community. We give unconditionally, and therefore we need to be able to receive unconditionally.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. And it ties us in nicely into one of my next questions and topics, because one of the phrases that you've used is, and I'm going to mess the phrase up completely now, but we talked about joy, about living the joy of the journey of cancer, I think was the phrase that you used. It's a really odd phrase to bring into you're laughing at me now. I'm gonna for people that can't see you.
I'm laughing with you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can laugh at me. It's absolutely fine. You have permission. Talk to me about joy and balance and boundaries, and how you've been able to enjoy the journey, because Claire absolutely being part of that, important part. Massive. To keep you going. How else have you been able to find joy?
So, and this starts back to that I don't want a fear-based relationship. And through my work, I know that if I'm in fight or flight, my sympathetic nervous system is overworking. That's the one that feeds us with adrenaline and cortisol. And what I need more of is my parasympathetic nervous system. When you're in fight or flight, your immune system is suppressed. And look, I'm on a journey with cancer. I want to recover from it. At that point, I really, really want to. So I need my parasympathetic nervous system to be working as hard as possible. I want my immune system to be working as hard as possible. To do that, I need to be as calm and relaxed as possible. So I do lots of meditation and visualizations and things like that. And part of that then that really enhances that is just looking for the joy in everyday things. And with that goes having a sense of humor, things like, Keirstoma and lots of other stuff. And my wife really, really helps me with that. She's got a very, very good sense of humor. So it then starts to become looking for the joy in your cancer journey, which is really just genuinely looking for the joy in life. And as soon as I consciously, and I do have to make myself consciously do that, there's days when I'm really not feeling it and I have to say, come on, where's the joy? I start to see joyful things in every single day. Coming here is a joyful thing to do. I've been really excited about coming here. I'm going in for chemotherapy after we finish this. I'm literally going to...
Yes, I remember you said you're going to your appointment, aren't you?
Yeah. So after this, I'm literally jump in the car, drive to the hospital, and they'll be plugging me into the latest port I've got that's connected to my body to deliver some drugs. And I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to walking into those chemotherapy bays. I will meet 5 or 6 different people going through a similar journey to me. I'll meet all the nurses. I get to meet new people, make new friends. The nurses are amazing. They all know me by name. They're engaged, they're funny, they're chatty, they've got music on, they're walking around singing to the music. It's such an amazing place to be. Why could I not find joy in that? So it's as you start looking for it, you find it. As you find it, you find more, and it becomes a self-perpetuating process. it then genuinely becomes deeper and deeper. It doesn't have to be a surface level, oh, I found the joy in this, isn't that nice? Let's post it on Instagram. It's genuinely a joyful thing, and I can have a joyful relationship with cancer.
Let's talk about some tools, because you've spent, make it sound really old, you've already confessed your age, so but you've spent decades working and supporting so many others. What tools have you taught others that you are now using yourself?
So basically, pretty much everything I teach to people will be used and continue to be used and has been used on myself in different areas, different reasons, whatever it might be, related to my cancer journey. First of all, the stress tools, because again, that's about wanting to have my parasympathetic nervous system working as well as possible. So I need to have a healthy relationship with stress, because it's there and it can be really positive and motivational. So I need to have a healthy relationship with stress. So all the stress tools I teach people have come into play. Guided visualizations in terms of crafting my vision, what that's going to be, and meditating on that every single day. And, largely the vision comes true. Okay, you set your intent. It's amazing how your mind starts to find the evidence to support the intent and the vision. So largely that has come true. I meditate for 20 minutes every single day. Again, that's just another way of drawing myself back into my parasympathetic nervous system. So it's giving my body and my mind that place of calm. And then I'm a big fan of journaling as well. Okay, and this was the thing that my eldest daughter Lucy did when I'm lying in a hospital bed. I've had the stoma operation. She turned up with a really nice sort of leather-clad journal that she'd bought me and a pen, and she said, "There you go. You recommend other people do this. I think it's about time you started doing it." And I went, "Yeah, you're right." And that night in my hospital bed, I wrote the first journal entry, and I've been journaling up until maybe 2 months ago every single day. And now I probably journal 3 or 4 times a week. And journaling, to go into a bit more detail about that, for me is a marvellous way to be able to explore how I'm feeling. These are about my core feelings, my happiness, my sadness, my hurt, my fear, my shame. Those areas that are in there get touched on and analysed. And it's also a marvellous way of emptying my head. And the greatest analogy I ever give people is the reason we write lists is not in order to remember something, it's so that we can forget it, because it's already on the list. Yeah, the moment you commit something to writing, then you're giving your mind permission to move on. And that's what a journal does, is you write stuff down and it gives your mind permission to move on. So it's really, really useful process for analysis, self-analysis, but it's also a really nice process for just allowing my mind to move on from stuff that's on it and go and enjoy life more.
It really ties nicely. There's 2 points really. One, my coach that I've been working with, she encouraged me to produce a done list,
right?
Because we always have a to-do list, but yes, we don't have a done list.
Yes.
So the moment it's gone off your list, you just move on to the next one, and
absolutely,
you don't acknowledge what you've done. You don't celebrate that little step. It might be, I've done that report, and people don't celebrate that, and we really should do. But just one of the second point was a post I put out only this week, is that, and it seems to have gone a little bit crazy and viral. Recording this in May, I don't know when this podcast will go out, and it was about that mental health is that job role. It might be the job. We've got to constantly look after ourselves, but the real role is our self-awareness. Yeah. And I don't know if you'd agree that by journaling, it helps us process and helps us become more self-aware. Would you agree?
Yeah, well, 100%. I've always said to people, my job is to help you become more self-aware and give you the tools to work on yourself. And then by doing that, you now have more choice in your life than you had before you met me. And the biggest hurdle is self-awareness, because people will spend time with me on a workshop or in a one-to-one. And at that moment, I've raised their awareness. I'm giving them tools. But when they leave me, if they unconsciously slip back into non-awareness, then pretty much none of what I've done to help them is ever going to help them, because they're not aware. So it's that constantly trying to drag yourself back to awareness that's so, so important.
As well, looking at it and looking at the other side of it, you've spoken before about externalizing those thoughts and what happens when you talk about the unspeakable out loud.
Yeah.
There's that internalizing and journaling, but of course there then is the talking about things out loud. How important has that been for you on the journey?
It's been really important, and my friendship group have been so good for that. And I've got different friends who operate at different levels for me, and I've got a couple who they know who they are, who we have some really quite deep conversations, and I will have been able to externalize to them those things. And by the way, I also have a therapeutic relationship as well with the counsellors, so I can talk to them as well, so that I can externalize those things. So it's all there. But yeah, once I've forgotten who it was who said it, but once your words hit the air, they lose the power that they had when they were inside your head. I'm paraphrasing that person, but it's absolutely true.
Julian, you've been a leader in a very important industry, a pioneer of so many different ways of looking at the world. What does leadership look like and mean to you now?
That's a deep question. One I don't necessarily feel qualified to expand on either. Leadership. It's one of those funny things. I think I've craved to be a leader, and then when people name me as a leader, I don't think I'm good enough or I'm up to it, so I shy away from being it. And it was interesting that when I first came out of my first video about my cancer journey, and I got so many people saying, "You're inspirational," and I got very, very emotional. I got very, very scared, and I quite frankly worried that I would not be able to live up to the expectations they had of me, even though all they'd done is use one word, inspirational. Yeah, and it was me making up what their expectations might be of me that was going on. So what do I think? Yeah, I think genuinely leadership now needs to be genuinely authentic. It needs to be, I'm dealing with this stuff and I'm trying to deal with it the best way I can, and I'll continue to deal with it the best way I can. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be amazing or fantastic, because I think actually a lot of stuff, we mix up a lot of leadership. In my opinion, in my opinion, leadership is 95% management. It's only 5% inspiration, if that. Okay, but there's lots of people out there being leaders who think they have to be inspiring all the time, whereas most of us have grown through being managers and going through management, and that's the hard graft of holding people to account, looking at the numbers, just keeping things efficient, just keeping diligent routine going, whatever it is. And it's only on occasions that we actually really have to be, or need to be, or deserve to be inspirational. And again, aren't we back into that world of putting ourselves under pressure, because there's so much social media out there going, aren't I fantastic and amazingly inspirational? And I go, well, if you are, then I have to be. And now I'm putting myself under massive pressure to be inspirational. So I think I'm trying to lead from a place of genuine authenticity, whilst knowing there'll be times when I'm trying too hard. So I definitely won't be authentic. And then I'll slip back into being genuinely authentic. I will make mistakes.
Do you think that your illness and your diagnosis has changed your definition of the word success then?
Yes. Yeah, it really, really has. Yeah. And I've spent all of my life looking into the future, defining what success is and aiming for success that I might never, ever get to. And I could have spent a lot more of my life literally just enjoying what I had in front of me and what was there to be enjoyed. And now success for me is enjoying the things that I really, really enjoy. And really it's human interaction and contact is what I really enjoy, as well as food and beer. And then I have ways of achieving those, which are things like playing badminton, there's a community there, playing golf, there's a community there, going out on my motorbike, there's a community there, spending time with my wife, spending time with my children. It's all really human-based interaction. It's just there's lots of different levels of facilitation going on. And that's really what it is for me. Success is enjoying the human interactions.
Getting a little bit personal for a moment.
What you mean you haven't got already?
Absolutely. I just want to be, because we talk about business and it's important, we're talking about leaders in disguise, and I see the way that you are leading and you're getting people to think that if they, today they might have a diagnosis that you had, and they then start thinking, actually, what am I doing all of this for? What is success for? But to bring it back a bit more personal, what do you want? Forgive me, I'm going to reword this better. In terms of your daughters and your grandchildren, what do you want them to know about you in the future? What legacy would you... Because we talk in business, don't we, about the legacy that we want to leave as a business.
Yeah. But
this isn't theoretical anymore.
Yeah.
So what legacy do you now, as a leader, I guess, as a human, but as a grandfather, as a father, as a family member, do you want to leave?
I want my children to be proud of me. And I think they are. And again, they know I'm not perfect, and they will hold me to that as well. So I think that's almost it, really. I probably spent the whole of my life wanting people to be proud of me, and I still want a small select group of people to be proud of me. I'd like my children, my wife, my friends to be proud of me in a non-regretful way. Do I want them to miss me? Hell yes, I do. Yeah. But I don't want them to feel pain in there. I just want them to feel enjoyment of the memories that we've had together. And then, because I have been thinking about this recently, what's my legacy? And maybe I'll write a book, maybe not. But the real legacy I leave, I personally, I'm not a religious person. I believe that once I'm gone, I'm gone. So my legacy will be the people that live on with my genes, but really more importantly with the behaviours and the values that I've influenced them with. And I can honestly look at my children and say I'm really proud of them. And I'm really proud of them now. So I know that I'll always be really, really proud of them. And so I sort of already know I've got my legacy.
To pick up that word proud, do you think they are proud of you, with what you've achieved and what
I think they are, yeah.
You are leaving?
Yeah, I think they are, yeah. Yeah, at the risk of really getting very, very emotional, Gary. I genuinely think they are proud of me. And they're proud of me, and they'd like me to be around longer. And I'm proud of them, and I'd like to be around longer. But actually, fate is going to have its hand in that, and we're just going to see what pans out.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're coming to the end. You'll be glad to know I'm leaving you emotional. What do you want, and what do you hope that people can take away from this? And is there anything that I've missed that you want to? Here's your moment, your opportunity to make sure that we do include. But my key question is, what do you hope that people take away from this, from listening and watching?
I hope that people take away that it's never too late to reconsider what meaning is to your life, what meaning your life has, and it's never too late to make different choices. Literally every moment you have is a choice point, and it's never ever too late. So don't tell yourself the lie that I can't change, I'm not like that, I could never be like that, things will never work like that for me. All those negative messages we can give ourselves in order to either give up and not have to try as much as we might have to, or because we genuinely think we can't change. So yeah, it's just that I think I've just said it. Yeah. Anything else I wanted to cover? Obviously, on a big fundraising drive at the moment, 3 amazing causes we're raising money for. There's 12 men involved. The most urgent fundraising event is going to walk 42 miles for charity on the 20th of June in 24 hours. I aim to do it in 18, but we've allowed ourselves 24 hours to do it over the North York Moors to Ravenscar. The causes we're raising money for are the Blood Cancer UK, who do amazing work into raising money and awareness and putting funds into research into blood cancers. And that's because one of the guys who's in the fundraising group is a survivor of blood cancer. The other one is Macmillan Cancer Support. I just think they do an amazing job. And quite frankly, I think that too many of us don't think about, we spend too much time thinking what a good life is. We don't think about what a good death might look like. And Macmillan are really good at helping with that. And then the third one is a British athlete who's a javelin thrower. Her name's Becca Walton. And she receives little or no funding from Sport England because of the way they're targeted for medals. British throwing gets almost nothing because they don't think that they will produce any medals, therefore they don't get any funding, therefore you're probably not going to get any medals, are you? And we're raising money for her. The link to cancer, if anybody's thinking, well, why are you doing that, is that Becca grew up on the same street that I live on. Her father was a really, really close friend of mine, and the fact I'm using him in the past tense lets you know what's happened, is that Becca's father, Derek, died 5 years ago of cancer. He was a massive influencer in my life. And so we're raising money for her because that's what he'd want us to do. So there'll be more fundraising events coming later.
Yeah. And we'll put the link out when we put social media out, and the show notes. We'll do our very best to make sure we include as much as we can doing that for people to go and look and reference it. Julian, thank you.
Thank you.
I've managed to stay composed during this, partly. I said at the start, it's a huge privilege to have this conversation with you. This is the emotional bit. To say thank you to you.
Thank you. And
so,
yeah, no, we all get something out of these, and I've got loads out of externalizing this stuff, and you've been a great interviewer, and just thank you for reaching out and saying, I want to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to throw into the, you know where we are. So down the camera, you know where we are. If you want to come and sit on this couch and make me cry, I've done it on national TV as well now. I really don't care about crying. Then come and sit down here. hello@leadersindisguise.com. You know where we are. Drop something on comments. I really don't know what to say. Julian, thank you. Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.